I used to close a movie theater on the late shift when I was 21. It was one of those old multiplexes that had been remodeled so many times it felt stitched together. New carpet in the lobby, old walls underneath, bright digital screens out front, but back hallways that still smelled like wet plaster, fryer oil, and something stale that never really went away. Most of the job was boring. Sweet popcorn, wipe counters, clean theaters after the last show, restock candy, count the register. The part everyone hated was taking trash and extra syrup boxes down to the basement storage room after midnight. Everybody joked about the basement. New hires got told it was haunted on their first week. I never believed it. Every old building has sounds. Pipes knock. Ice machines groan. Air moves through vents and makes voices out of nothing. I closed alone on a Thursday in October. It had been a slow night. Last showing ended around 11:40. By 12:30, the assistant manager had left after cashing out, and I stayed behind to finish cleanup because I needed the hours. I remember playing music softly from my phone while I swept Theater 6. The movie posters in the hallway looked strange after closing, all those frozen smiling faces with no one around. At about 1:05 a.m., I loaded 2 trash bags, a box of cup lids, and a stack of paper towel rolls onto a hand truck and headed for the basement. The stairwell door slammed behind me harder than usual. That sound always bothered me because once it shut, the theater noise disappeared completely. Upstairs there was always some hum from the soda machines, or arcade games, or rooftop units. Down there it was different. The silence felt packed in, heavy, and close. The first light came on over the stairs. The second flickered on halfway down the hall. The rest stayed dark. I wheeled the hand truck towards storage and heard something metallic clatter somewhere deeper in the basement. I stopped and listened. Nothing. I figured one of the maintenance guys had left something leaning against a wall and it finally fell over. I kept going, turned into storage, and began unloading the box of lids onto a shelf. That was when I heard footsteps. Not loud. Slow. Soft shoes on concrete. They came from the hallway outside the room, past the open doorway, and kept going. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. I actually felt relieved for a second. I thought maybe another employee had come down and I hadn't noticed. I stepped into the doorway just in time to see the far end of the hall. No one there. I stood still, staring toward the maintenance rooms. The lights down that end were off. I told myself I'd imagine the footsteps, but my skin had already gone cold. Not scared exactly. That prickly feeling you get when your body notices something before your brain catches up. I finished unloading faster than I needed to. When I turned the hand truck around, I saw that one of the old movie posters on the wall outside storage had fallen crooked. It was hanging by one corner, glass cracked across the center. I know it hadn't looked like that when I came in. I would have noticed. It was one of those huge frame posters from years ago, too heavy to shift on its own. I backed away from it and laughed under my breath, trying to shake off the feeling. Then I heard it, someone whispering. I couldn't make out words, just a low voice like someone talking from behind a closed door. It was coming from the electrical room. That room was always locked. I walked a few steps into the hall before common sense kicked in. I should have gone upstairs right then. Instead, I stood there, hand truck in front of me like it was going to protect me, staring at the electrical room door. The whispering stopped, then the knob moved, not rattled, turned. Slowly, I froze so hard it hurt. The knob turned all the way, stopped, and eased back into place. I waited for the door to open. It didn't. I dropped the hand truck and ran back toward the stairs. I had made it maybe 10 feet when all the lights in the hallway shut off at once. The darkness was instant, total. I heard my own breath way too loud, and then, from somewhere a few feet behind me, another breath answered it. I don't know how else to explain that moment. I knew something was there. I couldn't see it, but I felt the space behind me was occupied, like the air had shape. I started moving with my hands out, trying not to fall, and the motion lights clicked back on one section at a time. In the weak yellow light, I saw someone standing at the far end of the hallway. At first I thought it was a customer, which made no sense. Then I thought maybe it was one of those cardboard promo cutouts someone had dragged downstairs as a joke, but it was too tall, too thin. It stood bent slightly forward, as if trying to look around the corner without moving its feet. I could see pale skin or maybe pale fabric, and what should have been a face looked blurred, like I couldn't get my eyes to focus on it. I said, "Who's there?" The thing didn't answer. It took one step. The sound it made was wrong. Bare skin on concrete, a wet slap. Then it took another. I ran. I hit the stairs so hard I nearly went down on my knees. I grabbed the rail, threw myself upward, and started pounding on the metal door at the top because my hands were shaking too badly to work the handle. When I finally got it open, I fell into the hallway behind Theater 8 and slammed it shut behind me. The lobby was empty, lights dimmed for closing. For a second I just stood there gasping, waiting to hear the basement door move. It didn't. I told myself I was done, that I'd leave the rest of the stock downstairs and make up some excuse in the morning. But my phone was gone. I realized I must have left it on a shelf in storage. I wish I could say I left it there. Instead, after maybe 5 minutes of pacing and arguing with myself, I opened the basement door again. The stairwell was lit. I went down slowly, every step feeling like a stupid decision. The hallway was empty. The hand truck was tipped over where I dropped it. The cracked poster hung crooked on the wall. My phone sat on the storage shelf with its flashlight on, even though I knew I hadn't turned it on. I grabbed it and turned to leave. That's when I noticed the video playing on the screen. My camera was open. It had recorded 38 seconds. The footage showed the storage room shelf, shaky at first, like the phone had been set down too fast. For a few seconds there was nothing. Then, in the doorway behind the shelf, something leaned into view. It was tall enough that its head nearly touched the frame. Skin gray-white, mouth open too wide. No expression, just that mouth hanging open like it was trying to remember how to look human. And then, in the video, it whispered in a voice so soft I had to turn the volume all the way up to hear it. "Last show." I deleted the video without thinking and ran upstairs again. I quit 2 days later. A month after that, one of the older projection guys told me the basement had been partially sealed off years ago after a pipe burst revealed part of the original foundation from the theater that stood there before ours. According to him, an employee had died down there in the 90s during a late closing shift. Fell, hit his head, and wasn't found until morning. I had worked enough midnight shifts to know that most calls sounded worse over the radio than they turned out in real life. A burglary in progress became a raccoon in a dumpster. Shots fired became fireworks left over from the weekend. Suspicious persons in the cemetery usually meant teenagers drinking cheap liquor and trying to scare each other. That is exactly what I thought this was going to be. It was just after 2:40 in the morning when dispatch sent me to St. Bartholomew Cemetery on the edge of town. The caller was an older man who lived across the road and said he could see lights moving between the headstones. He also said he heard chanting. Dispatch added that the caller sounded genuinely frightened. I remember giving a half smile when I acknowledged the call. Chanting in a cemetery. It sounded like kids playing out some horror movie fantasy. I had seen enough of that sort of thing over the years to expect black candles from a Halloween store, spray-painted symbols copied wrong from the internet, and a bunch of panicked teenagers pretending they had not been there. Still, the place gave me a bad feeling even before I arrived. St. Bartholomew was old, older than the town itself in some parts, with crooked stones and massive trees that blocked out whatever moonlight made it through the clouds. The road leading there was narrow and unlit. My headlights swept over iron fencing, dead grass, and a chapel that had not been used in decades. There was fog low to the ground, not thick enough to hide anything, but enough to make the whole cemetery look like it was breathing. I parked by the front gate and shut off the engine. The silence hit me immediately. No traffic, no insects, no wind in the trees. Then, faintly, I heard voices. Not laughing, not shouting, chanting. Low and steady, too far away to make out the words. I radioed in that I was on scene and requested another unit to start my way, mostly as a precaution. Then I took my flashlight and went through the gate. The path curved between rows of old stones and family plots boxed in by cracked marble curbs. My boots sounded too loud on the gravel. The chanting grew clearer as I moved deeper in, and I started to see light flickering through the trees ahead. Orange, maybe from candles. I told myself it was exactly what I expected. A group of kids trying to terrify each other. But something about the rhythm of their voices bothered me. It was too even, too serious. No giggling, no breaking character, no whispering the way teenagers do when they are acting brave, but waiting for someone to ruin the mood. When I got close enough, I killed my flashlight and moved the last stretch in the dark. There were 6 of them in a clearing near the oldest part of the cemetery, where the stones were so weathered you could barely read the names. 5 stood in a loose circle, and 1 knelt in the middle. They looked young, high school age at most, wearing dark hoodies and jackets against the cold. Around them were candles set in a rough ring, their flames bending strangely even though there was no wind. Spray painted on the ground was a symbol I did not recognize. Not a pentagram, not exactly. It looked twisted, as though whoever drew it had changed it halfway through or copied it from memory. There were other things in the circle, too. A metal bowl, a bottle of something dark, and what looked like pages torn from a book. I stepped out and shouted, "Police department, everyone stay where you are." 5 of them jumped hard and turned. The one in the middle did not move. For a second, nobody said anything. Their faces were pale in the candlelight, all of them younger than I had expected. One girl started crying immediately. One of the boys lifted his hands and kept saying, "We weren't doing anything. We weren't doing anything." Another one stared at me with the kind of blank terror that told me he was no longer scared of getting caught. He was scared of something else. I ordered them away from the circle. 4 obeyed right away. One had to be pulled by the arm by another kid. But the one kneeling in the center still did not move. I thought at first he was refusing. Then I realized he was trembling so hard his whole body was shaking. I moved in, sweeping my flashlight over him. He was maybe 16, maybe 17, thin, black hair hanging into his face, hands clenched at his sides. His lips were moving. He was still chanting, quietly now, under his breath. I told him to stop. He didn't. I took 2 more steps, and that was when the temperature dropped. People say things like that all the time when they tell scary stories, and I never believed them before that night. But it really did drop. 1 second it was a cold spring night. The next it felt like I had opened a freezer door. My breath fogged thick in front of me. The candle flames all leaned inward toward the kneeling boy, as if being pulled. Behind me, one of the girls screamed. The boy in the circle suddenly stopped chanting and lifted his head. I wish I could say he looked possessed or monstrous right away. It would make more sense if he had. Instead, what frightened me was how normal he looked at first, pale, scared, eyes wide. Then he smiled, not at me, at something over my shoulder. I spun around and saw nothing but headstones and dark trees, but I heard it then. Footsteps moving slowly through the grass behind the outer ring of candles. Heavy footsteps, deliberate, circling us. The kids heard it too. They all turned toward the sound. One of the boys let out a choking sob and said, "No, no, no, we didn't finish it. We didn't finish it." I drew my weapon, and my flashlight found nothing, no person, no animal. Yet the footsteps continued, pressing down wet grass in a slow loop around us. Wherever they passed, the fog thickened and gathered low, as if something unseen was dragging it along. I got on the radio for backup. All I got back was static. The kneeling boy started laughing. It was not loud, and that somehow made it worse. He laughed like someone hearing a private joke. Then the candles went out all at once. Every single one. The clearing dropped into darkness so complete I could hear the kids breathing and little else. I swung the flashlight wildly, catching slices of terrified faces, old stone angels, dripping branches. Then the beam landed on the far side of the clearing, and for half a second it illuminated a figure standing between 2 monuments. It was too tall. That was my first clear thought. Too tall, too narrow, and wrong in a way I still cannot describe cleanly. Not like a man in dark clothing, not like a trick of shadow. It seemed to absorb the light instead of reflecting it. The outline of shoulders, the suggestion of arms, and a head tilted slightly forward as if studying us. Where the face should have been, there was only a deeper patch of darkness. Then the light flickered across it, and it was gone. The kids started screaming all at once. 2 bolted into the cemetery. 1 fell over a headstone and crawled. The girl who had cried earlier grabbed my sleeve so hard I thought she would rip it off. I shouted for everyone to get to the gate, but my voice sounded swallowed by the dark. From somewhere behind us came a sound like a deep breath being taken underground. The kneeling boy rose to his feet. He did it too smoothly, without using his hands, and he was still smiling. His eyes found mine, and in the flashlight beam they looked black, not dark brown. Black, edge to edge. Then he spoke in a voice that was not the one I had heard earlier. They asked for proof. I backed away, pulling the girl with me. He took one step out of the circle. The symbol on the ground seemed darker than paint now, wet-looking, though nothing had been spilled. The metal bowl beside him rattled against the stone. Somewhere among the graves, that slow, circling movement stopped. The silence that followed was the worst part of all, because then I knew whatever had been moving out there was no longer circling. It was standing still, watching. I do not remember deciding to run. I remember grabbing two of the kids by their jackets, shouting at the others to move, and forcing all of us back toward the main path. Branches snapped in the dark to our left. Something paced us between the graves, never fully visible, always just beyond the reach of the flashlight. Once I caught a glimpse of what looked like a hand resting on the side of a stone cross, long and black and jointed wrong. Then it slipped away. When we reached the gate, my radio came back to life so suddenly it made me flinch. Dispatch was calling my unit over and over, asking me to respond. I looked back once before piling the kids toward my cruiser. There was no figure in the cemetery, no movement, just the clearing in the distance, and one small point of orange light where a single candle had lit itself again. Backup arrived within minutes. We searched the grounds until sunrise. We found the candles, the spray paint, the torn pages, and the bowl. We found footprints from the teenagers and my own. Nothing else. The kneeling boy, the one who smiled, was gone. No tracks leading away, no broken fence, no sign that he had left the cemetery at all. The others were interviewed separately. Every one of them told the same story in different words. They had found instructions online. They thought it was a joke. They thought nothing would happen. The boy in the center had insisted on finishing the ritual after the others wanted to stop. None of them would ever say his name again. I still work nights, though not by choice anymore. Every now and then I get sent near St. Bartholomew. The cemetery is locked tighter now, and the town says the whole thing was mass hysteria, fear feeding fear in the dark. Maybe that is true.